Hello and welcome to a Tuesday. Is today Tuesday? Yes, Tuesday afternoon edition where our days are all messed up here because the NFL schedule is off. Normally, our days are consumed by when NFL is happening. We expect games to be Monday. We expect games to be Thursday. We do not expect them to be on a Wednesday, which Baltimore and Pittsburgh will be. On today's show, Michael Leone and I will be going over what we saw in Week 12, what lessons we can learn from both player construction on a micro level and more macro construction, some mistakes that we may have made, some good plays that we may have made. Spend a little bit of extra time on that because this Wednesday showdown slate between the Steelers and the Ravens is such a freaking mess. Over 20 players for the Ravens on the COVID list. Anyways, Leone, how was your Thanksgiving, buddy? How's it going?
It was good. Someone in chat was asking, did you even have a Thanksgiving this year? We know you're pretty anti Thanksgiving, but mine went well. Hectic week this week though, man. These Wednesday games and whatnot throw me off. I am repping the basketball version of the ETR hoodie though. Been doing some basketball work. So if you do season long basketball, we'll have some stuff for you pretty shortly. Definitely want to shout that out. And there's some underdog best ball stuff, which is like a fun, easy way to get into season long basketball if you haven't done that before.
Yes. Two things. First thing that I want to say is because I am just like a guilt-ridden monster, I can't stand up to anybody. And so I acquiesce and I say, yes, I'll do Thanksgiving. I'll go pretend that I eat the stuffing and I'll eat the disgusting bird carcass. And, I don't actually eat it. And so there's that. I did it, of course. Second thing is, yes, NBA is coming very, very, very soon. Season is scheduled to tip off on December 22nd. We have been putting a lot of work in. And by we, I mean Leone and Drew and Mike Gallagher and Wiggins on the basketball side of things. We will have a draft kit just like we had for NFL. We will have an in-season product just like we have for NFL. The difference is that it's every day. And so there is a lot of work to do with NBA, but people are rewarded. I mean, I think generally speaking on NBA, I think you're more likely to be rewarded if you are a good player, if you are hardworking, if you are detail-oriented in NBA, more likely to be rewarded than you are in NFL. That said, NFL is just so much fun. What do you think about that comparison, Leone?
Yeah, it's definitely you need a little bit more help, I think, on the NBA side than NFL if you're playing the DFS side of things. It's harder to kind of just pipe in and see the projections and make some good tournament teams off the ownership and the projections. You got to be a little bit more tuned in for NBA. I think that's the biggest difference to me is it's like, it's so news centric too. And NFL, we've got all week to prepare and even the casual players know who all the players are. Whereas NBA, I guess too, because there's less variance, there's more room to kind of make mistakes, which is where, having Drew and Gallagher helps all of us be better at NBA and kind of avoid those mistakes.
Yeah, I actually think that people can win in NFL without looking at projections. I mean, I'm sure you disagree, but I think there are some people who could win without looking at projections. In NBA, without looking at projections, I think you are borderline dead. And so obviously I expect us to have the best NBA projections. Anyways, enough. Let's get to Week 12. And I thought it was a really interesting week because I didn't think there were a lot of pivots to make. In tournaments off of the obvious stuff, the Mahomes stuff, the Josh Allen stuff, the Herbert stuff. I didn't think there was a lot beyond that. And I know you got on the Tennessee Indy game a lot, which we can talk about in a second here, but I didn't feel like there was many other places to go. So my thoughts for tournaments, at least, were to try to play the Mahomes, Josh Allen, Herbert stuff, but try at least to play it in a contrarian way. You can see one of my teams here from the spin move, which didn't end up as contrarian as I would have hoped. But yeah, before we get into this team, just generally speaking, what do you think about how Week 12 kind of set up?
Yeah, it was a hard week. And, you'll see when we look at my team too, you and I kind of made two decisions. Your decision with the chalk was to play kind of the chalky KC, really high upside stack, but fade Minnesota. And my decision was I kind of made sure I got a Minnesota guy in my lineup, but didn't do the Mahomes stack. And if we had sort of combined efforts here, Adam, we might have come up with something pretty good, but alone things didn't go so well. Your lineup cashed though, the 61 burger from Tyreek, insane. But I felt like going into the week, I I sort of did think there were more pivots, maybe not in terms of pure game stats, but there were a lot of one-off plays I wanted to make. So, Eckler, who you used, I thought was one of the best ones. He ended up 18% here. He was closer to like 10% and some other stuff though. And as a result of wanting to have a Minnesota player in my lineup, still wanting to have correlation and wanting to make some of these low end pivots, I found myself running out of spots. And the way I got around that, and the reason I got on Tennessee stuff, was I could stack Tannehill with AJ Brown and bring it back with a chalky Nyheim Hines, who I just thought was a really good value, and I wanted to smash even at chalk ownership, and that let me get a correlated game stack without taking up a bunch of roster spots. Whereas the Mahomes double, if you did the Mahomes double and you felt like you needed a Minnesota player, you're already taking up a bunch of roster spots, and that doesn't even account for kind of like some of the RB values you wanted in. So it was tough to sort of find the middle ground between those two concepts this week.
Yeah, and I thought one of the interesting was I didn't really love any of the bringbacks on Tampa, but I felt like obligated to bring it back with the Mahomes double. And so there were people that were asking, well, the guy who won, one of our subs who won, turned like 400 and 250K. He played I think it was a Mahomes double without any Tampa Bay guys. What do you think about not bringing it back when you have a double in a spot like Mahomes? Because honestly, I didn't even like Antonio Brown. I'll talk about a mistake playing Antonio Brown specifically in a second here, but generally speaking, what do you think about playing doubles without bringbacks?
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm kind of in the mindset of always bringing it back, but I do think when you get a team like Kansas City, they don't necessarily need to be pushed for that game stack to hit, right? And it's kind of crazy. This score even ended up 27-24. It felt like they were running from ahead. It didn't even end up super high scoring game, but it's not like you need Mahomes to be pushed. He threw for 300 plus yards in the first half in this game. So the idea behind a game stack is kind of like, oh, well, if Mahomes gets there, the game's going to go nutty. And that's not necessarily true. Mahomes, we saw versus the Jets, he puts up a huge game, throws for 5 touchdowns. No one on the Jets is worthwhile coming back. So I think you kind of want to think through, whereas I was playing like a Tannehill stack, and like for him to get there, you kind of want like a pass heavier script, and the bring back's a little bit more natural. So the other thing that made this difficult was Tampa Bay had a lot of upside as a group in terms of passing upside, because you thought they're going to have to throw a lot in this game due to game script, and they're really high up there in pass rate over expectation, but they're so spread out. It's tough to pin down the bring back. And going into the game, my favorite was Antonio Brown as well, but I was pretty shocked to see this ownership. But to answer your question more directly, like I think in large field MME, when you're like really trying to hit the nuts, you can be a little bit less restrictive in forcing a bring back because you need the pure nuts. And the other thing too that Drew asked me, because he does MME, I do small field. He goes, in the Sunday morning, he asked me, would you do Mahomes single stacks instead of double stacks? And I said, yeah, I think it actually makes sense this week, because if you get the alpha wide receiver game, this seems like it's going to be a high scoring week. You want to be able to hit the nuts. You don't want to necessarily tie up a second roster spot in an okay Kansas City Chief. And that ended up being pretty smart. So you kind of got to think through the week and how things go, and also the types of fields you're playing. Whereas the stuff I'm playing, if I was stacking Mahomes, I surely would have double stacked them in a 200, 400 man field, because I want to limit the amount of things I want to get right. So that's kind of the big difference between big field and small field. Big field, you're trying to hit the absolute nuts. Small field, you're trying to limit the amount of things you have to get right.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was a small field. I think there was like 400, 450 players in this tournament. My thought was that I don't want to play Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey. So I was just going to play one of those. And when given the option, of course, I'm going to not play the more expensive tight end. And so I had Tyreek Hill, and then I tried to get off the double into something else. I thought a little bit about Demarcus Robinson, didn't feel great about that. So I went with Sammy Watkins in his game back from injury. And so I felt pretty good about that. Also, I knew that was going to be chalky. Did not want to play one of the 3 chalk running backs in this lineup, which to me was Brian Hill, Nyheim Hines, and Dalvin Cook. And so I was like, let me pivot at running back here, play James Robinson and Austin Eckler. And their ownership got a little bit too high, more higher than I would have wanted, but I felt good about that. The place where I don't feel great is I should have known that Antonio Brown was going to be higher owned than Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, because Antonio Brown was cheaper than both of them, and because he had seen more target share lately. There was way more chatter on Antonio Brown. So it should have been Godwin or Evans here. Then the other mistake is, the way that Darren Waller wins is when Derek Carr has a ton of attempts, and so and a ton of completions and to be pushed, like you mentioned. And so not to have an Atlanta player in here with Darren Waller, I think was bad. I probably couldn't have fit one, and I would have had to change something up and maybe not ended up playing Waller. So I don't love that. And I just wanted to get Andy Isabella. And so I didn't have any secondary stacks. I just wanted to get Andy Isabella in. And then the Charger stuff I liked. I knew that Buffalo was going to be popular. Bills dropped back so many times. And so Josh Allen can be extremely mistake prone. So I like playing Chargers here. Really happy to get them at 0.9%. So I think some mistakes there with Antonio Brown and with not playing correlation at all with Waller. But yeah, I think it's okay. What do you think?
I like this team quite a bit. I do wonder if you were tilting at all when Keyshawn Johnson scored that touchdown temporarily for the Cardinals that came off the board. But I like the Mahomes, Tyreek, Watkins, and then playing Waller, even though Waller is kind of chalky, because you're really leveraging Kelsey, right? Where you're saying Mahomes hits, but Kelsey doesn't. Then give me the other expensive tight end. So I can win tight end and have the KC stack hit. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about that. And like you said, you couldn't afford the Atlanta side of things. As far as Antonio Brown, I think we both agree if we knew the ownership on this, we wouldn't have made the play. Like that's a bad play at 20%. That was the play I was hoping to. I thought he was going to be sub 10. And you really went out on a limb fading the chalk running backs. I mean, it's tough to fade all 3 chalk running backs on a week, and you did it and did it really successfully. You gained a huge amount of leverage on the field. So I don't know. I think this is a pretty sharp team altogether. I thought, you had the leverage off the Chargers Bills passing game stuff with Eckler and the Chargers defense. I like this team quite a bit. So I'm going to say this is a pretty sharp team. The only real big thing I think we both agree is just the Antonio Brown was not worth it at that ownership had we known it would be that high.
Yeah, for sure. And I did have some Henry Hines correlation teams, but just didn't have them with Tyreek, and so you're dead. Let's go to your Thunderdome team, Leone, king of the Thunderdome Bubbles. I mean, to take a stone bubble based. How many people played Tyreek in this?
I think it was 20%. I think I had there's there's one non-Tyreek team ahead of me. I think I had the second best non-Tyreek team. So this was painful. Again, this was the strategy where I had a lot of one-offs I liked. So I did the skinny Tannehill stack, bringing back Hines. So I just wanted to eat that chalk. It was huge on Eckler. And we almost got a bigger Eckler game. He was stopped at the 1 twice in this game on separate possessions. And then for me, I was eating some Minnesota chalk. And, eating the Minnesota chalk instead of the KC passing game chalk ended up hurting me. But I'm not too upset with my team. I mean, literally, if Tyreek Hill scores 40 fantasy points instead of 60, I finish like 4th or 5th in this tournament. And, I mean, that 40 fantasy points is like a 96th percentile outcome. So who knows what 60 is, like 99.9th. So I felt pretty good. I definitely got out there for a really small field. I played Debo, I got Debo Samuel at like 0.6% ownership in another tournament and played him in the dome. So I was proud of myself for kind of like sticking with some guys that I knew would be mega low owned, and really getting the leverage off the chalk. It was a tough week for me in the sense that I felt like I got a lot right with like the Eckler, Debo Samuel stuff, like out there plays, but it really hurt Adam to not get paid off this week with so much chalk failure, with hitting on some of those guys. But at the end of the day, if you didn't have Tyreek Hill, you didn't make money, almost no matter what you did. So it was a little bit of a demoralizing week because these are generally the weeks we do pretty well at.
Yeah. I mean, this has to be one of the best non-big dog or Tyreek teams for sure. And when Leone showed me this team on Sunday morning, I was like, oh my God, you're going to be the only one on the planet with those 3 wide receivers. I mean, like literally the only one. It didn't even really cross my mind to play any of those 3 wide receivers, even in tournaments. Leone's out here playing them in the 5K.
And one quick note on that, like the guys coming back from injury, generally when guys are coming back from injury, teams have been smart about they're not bringing them back unless they're ready. And people have been afraid to play these guys all year long, and they've really continued to come through with Debo and with Eckler. A big conversation this week, I know Drew's going to write about in his leverage article though, was the correlations really didn't hit that hard. We already talked about not bringing back on Tampa Bay. I played Cup with Debo. even though Debo is the guy I wanted to play most, and Cup kind of like sinks this lineup. So it was a weird week where sometimes I think you just gotta tip your cap and say, like, if the correlations aren't going to hit, I'm going to probably make most of my lineups correlated. But it's also a reminder to me that, once in a while, if you get a one-off like Debo, who's like middle of the pack price, can get there on his own, you kind of got to think through, okay, does the correlation really need to hit for Debo to get there? And the answer is probably like no. But we also had Cup with a good projection, low ownership. So it was like a fine thing to do, but it was a difficult week if you've like really forced correlation in your lineups.
Yeah, for sure. I talked about the guys coming back from injury and also the reports we get from guys coming back from injury. I talked about this on the solo pod. You can check it out. It's free on our podcast feed. But yeah, I mean, the reports on Christian McCaffrey, on Austin Eckler, on all these guys, even the reports on like Carson Wentz last night, like player usage reports from reporters can be extremely, extremely shaky and can drive down ownership. Like there was a report before Christian McCaffrey came back that he was going to rotate series with Mike Davis. I mean, it's just completely outrageous.
I was joking with Peter Overset because we had talked Saturday night. We make some lineups together for our Tilt Space show that, let's just mute the word Austin Eckler on Twitter Sunday morning because we know the inevitable Rappaport reports coming with a limited workload. And sure enough, we got something early about how he wouldn't be a bell cow, which like was completely irrelevant. But after the McCaffrey thing, it was like kind of like hold strong, just ignore these things, because I really kicked myself the McCaffrey week where I backed off based on the report. But a lot of times the whole reason you're getting the guy at low ownership is because there's some risk there. If there wasn't risk there, you would never get the guy at the ownership that you're going to get him at.
All right. By the way, please, if you're enjoying this, if you want us to do more of these free kind of recaps and look aheads to Showdown, smash the like button. That's an amazing banner you have there. Smash the like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications for when we go live. And we're putting up plenty of videos and stuff like that for you guys as well. All right. Let's go to the Showdown slate, man. Tomorrow there will be a Showdown slate. It will be Wednesday night football in the NFL. It will be a mess of a game because Lamar Jackson is not playing. Willie Snead is not playing. Mark Andrews is not playing. James Conner is not playing. Des Bryant is back in the NFL somehow. I don't know if the Ravens have a tight end available in this game. So we just started looking at this. We just started working on projections and ownership. I'd encourage you guys, if you're subscribers, to go back tomorrow. We will have much finer tuned projections and ownership projections. But from an overall perspective in this game, I didn't have high hopes for Lamar Jackson in this spot. Now to ask Robert Griffin to go in there without Mark Andrews, I have extremely low hopes for this Ravens offense in this spot. What a mess, Leone. Just overall picture of this Showdown slate.
Yeah. I mean, I guess these are good Showdown slates if you're a contrarian player. We saw one that was messy earlier in the year with San Francisco where the projection inputs are so volatile that the market, if they're tracking market projections, can end up just like on the completely wrong play. And, we were high on Trent Taylor that week, and it was Richie James who just had a massive game at lower ownership. But there was so much volatility that it was like, it could have been Richie James. Like our projections probably overstated the confidence there. And it's the same thing this week where there's just so much up in the air, particularly with the Baltimore pass catchers, that who knows what's going to happen. We have, you mentioned the difficult spot for Robert Griffin. We've got him for under 200 passing yards in this game. And while he's a mobile quarterback, we're not expecting him to run, near the extent that Lamar was running. So, and then Baltimore was supposed to be without Ingram and Dobbins. Game got pushed back so far that they're actually cleared to be able to play. Mm-hmm. So we've got them projected in. So that's a three-headed monster. We've got four guys now between Griffin and the three backs and Edwards, Dobbins, and Ingram with 20+% rush shares, which makes it and they don't really catch passes. So, you look at the running backs, it's difficult. And then on the Pittsburgh side of things, Connor's out due to COVID. Jalen Samuels is out with an injury, which leaves you, we'll see if they have a third back, but we've got right now all the work to Anthony McFarland and Benny Snell. And same thing, like if you've got a beat on who it's going to be, you can kind of fade the ownership a little bit. Benny Snell right now, McFarland right now looks like a pretty good leverage play off of Snell if Snell's going to be higher owned, and he's quite a bit pricier.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the Baltimore pass catchers. I think that's going to be a key to the slate. Robert Griffin, I don't expect to do well, but he's going to have to complete passes to somebody. And as you mentioned, no Mark Andrews and no Willie Snead are the top two pass catchers for this team. I don't think all of a sudden Marquise Brown is going to start being a load-bearing wide out. I don't know how much Des Bryant can give them. Like, I'm kind of skeptical that Des Bryant can give them much more. So to me, it's a bigger chance for Miles Boykin, for Devin Duvernay. The problem is it's an extremely difficult matchup against Pittsburgh. So there's going to be punts available on Baltimore in some of these lineups. What do you think about playing some of these Baltimore punts? And do you have to play them with Robert Griffin, who I think we both think will probably maybe it's hard to say a quarterback's over-owned in Showdown when he's only projected to be 40% or so, I think we have. But yeah, it's at least worth talking about.
Yeah. And I was somewhat trying to just needle Drew by saying Baltimore was down their 1 and 2 pass catchers, implying that Marquise Brown was not one of those. But if you look at the last 4 weeks, Snead at 21%, 22% target share, Andrews at about 24%, Marquise Brown 15%, and then Des Bryant is 4th, which becomes 2nd of the healthy guys. So what a disaster. And on top of that, you had Nick Boyle lost for the injury or lost for the season. They've got Luke Wilson at tight end, but he's questionable with a non-COVID related illness. So then we kind of galaxy brain ourselves into fullback Patrick Richard. He's out with COVID too. So I like Duvernay the best, Devin Duvernay. He was earning more playing time, good slot receiver. There's, I guess, some double dip return equity. Like, that's the point we're at on the Showdown slate where I'm referencing a double dip opportunity. But it's really just so up in the air. If Luke Wilson isn't able to go, then Eric Tomlinson or there's another tight end that's on the practice squad might get called up. So it's tough. What do you see as far as the guys behind Marquise Brown, kind of replace? I mean, there's just so many targets to replace.
Yeah, I think Boykin is the best talent. I mean, Boykin is a true size, speed freak. He doesn't play inside like Duvernay can, where Snead has played. But with a new quarterback coming in, you don't know exactly how it's going to go. And Lamar's been so bad throwing this year. Like, I have optimism from Boykin, and I would want to be lower than market on Des Bryant, who I think can't really see a role expansion. Like, it's just like, at this point in his career, he just can't. So I think both Duvernay and Boykin would be my favorites there. And then, I don't know if you need the stone punts. Like, even if Jarrell Adams or Tomlinson or whoever ends up playing, like, I'm not sure you need that because we don't have that much salary to spend on this slate. So I think there's going to be a lot of lineups that leave a ton of salary on here. Where you do, go ahead.
I'm also you can definitely leave a ton of salary on this slate. It could be really ugly. The Pittsburgh D is absolutely in play. I'm a little bit confused that, like, Luke Wilson, I know is questionable, but he's not on this slate. But he was scheduled to be on the slate on Draftkings as available when it was originally on Thursday. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss something on him. But he's not available in the Draftkings player pool. So even if he does play, you can't use him.
Yeah, we're still 24 hours away from tip or 23 hours. And so I think that they could add some players, but yeah, never utter the words double dip. Good point. Okay. Yeah, they've been using more 3 wide since they lost Boyle, to Antoine's point here. Ever since they lost Boyle, they've been going more 3 wide anyways. Losing Snead, I think, hurts, though. I mean, as Leone showed, he's been getting so much work. Pittsburgh side, go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't know what they're going to do. But if you don't think Des Bryant can play more, James Proche, at $800 rookie wide receiver, the potential he sees an uptick. And they just do go wide receiver heavy. I mean, if they don't have a tight end or they're calling up one tight end from the practice squad, they're going to have to play some pretty wide receiver heavy sets, which, initially you would expect them to be really run heavy given the issues in the passing game with Lamar out, the top pass catchers out, but they might have to do it out of a spread formation because I don't know, they can't play big formations. They just literally don't have the guys to do it.
Right. Okay, what we do know and we can project well is the Pittsburgh pass game because they have been throwing at a rate way over expectation. I mean, they've been going full YOLO late to the point where like James Conner was like almost unusable because they're just like, we're going to throw the ball on every play. And when you have Chase Claypool, when you have Deontay Johnson, when you have Juju on your team, well, that's a pretty good strat. And I'll throw in Ebron too. And they're getting Vance McDonald, I believe, back for this game as well. So I would expect another pass heavy game plan out of the Steelers. Deontay Johnson has just been an absolute target monster in games he started and finished. But now I feel like the public has come around on Deontay Johnson. I think you still remain lower than market on Deontay Johnson. Explain the underlying stats why you're lower than market on Deontay Johnson.
I'm torn on Deontay Johnson. On one hand, I feel like the market overrates him. His efficiency is not very strong. Now, efficiency can be volatile. So I think like the marker in Deontay Johnson's camp is he's earning the most targets, and that's kind of a skill to earn the most targets, and the efficiency volatile, and that will follow. But when the market's so on it, I'm like, this is a guy, we're talking about how Juju's dust this year, and Deontay Johnson has yards per target, half a yard lower than Juju Smith-Schuster, and that's, inflated off of Deontay's last game, which was pretty strong. So he's just known as this big play guy, but his yards per reception really isn't that high, and his catch rate is pretty low. So, but he's earning the most targets. That's why he's the top projected guy. We've never seen a dynamic like this, right, Adam? Where let me put all teams. So the top 4 projected players are the Pittsburgh passing game. We've never seen a showdown where one, you're not getting a player from the other team mixed in the top 4 guys in any fashion, particularly their quarterback, and two, there's no running back of the top, even if you extend it to the Baltimore guys, the top 6 players in this game are either quarterbacks or wide receivers, which we never see. So I like Juju to come in under owned in this game. Right now, we have the projected ownership between Juju, Claypool, and Deontay pretty similar, but these are really rough to just kind of give us a broad idea. And when Cody fine tunes these, I would expect Juju to be the least owned of the top 3 Pittsburgh receivers, just kind of based on recent results, but also you just have this lingering feeling of Juju is just kind of meh all season long.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And I know that Deontay Johnson's ADOT is really low, but Juju's ADOT is just like wildly low. And so, it's hard for him. He needs volume, and you don't get the volume may not be there in games when Claypool and Johnson are out there because those guys are so good. And Ben clearly loves throwing to Deontay Johnson. We would be remiss if we didn't mention Dink's boy. I mean, am I going to lose this bet, Leone? I mean, this Will Fuller thing, like imagine having Will, I mean, they're dead. Everybody, and I got a bunch of action on this because I tweeted about it. I had everybody dead with Will Fuller versus Marquise Brown. And now get life from Peds when everybody in the NFL is on Peds. This guy actually gets caught. And now, and now the Marquise Brown is actually live. I mean, I don't think he's going to have a good game here with Robert Griffin against the Steelers, but I mean, I don't know, man. It's just this Will Fuller thing has me all in knots.
I don't think you have a lot to worry about because, Dink even said he didn't take the Will Fuller news as, oh my God, I'm live for Marquise Brown to catch him. He took it as, oh my God, I have to somehow get this bet null and voided because Will Fuller has been cheating because Marquise Brown's still not going to catch him. And I think this is actually good for you in the long run because it's going to be super embarrassing for Dink to lose this bet with an extra 4 weeks to try and catch him. But yeah, I mean, what sucks about Brown is people are still going to play him, right? Like I would say, oh, this is a great spot to get him low owned, but people almost have to play him because who the hell are they going to play?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. What people are going to play, though, I think is defense. And so on this slate, people are going to play the Steelers defense a ton. How do you feel about expensive, high-owned defenses in Showdown?
I usually suck it up and fade the expensive high-owned defenses. There's ways you can get unique and still play them if you're doing a full MME set. But if I was doing single entry or something like that, I wouldn't play an expensive defense. I think the ownership here, we've got it projected at 32%. That's way too high. I mean, if the Steelers, I understand that there's an outcome where they just absolutely dominate this game. Even if they don't score a touchdown, they can rack up sacks and a couple of turnovers. But I would much rather try and play a more contrarian set and use some Baltimore skill players and get leverage against a really high-owned Pittsburgh defense. So I'm pretty anti-expensive, high-priced defenses. I'm going to stick with that this slate, even though it obviously looks good for the Steelers on paper.
Yeah, I do want to note, circling back to the running backs real quick, I do want to note that J.K. Dobbins seemed to move ahead of the other guys, Ingram and Gus Edwards, in the last game. The last game was so long ago. I don't know how much that sticks. Like, I know everybody's been away, but I mean, J.K. Dobbins has been away for so long. I'm not sold that J.K. Dobbins is going to be so far ahead. I do think he'll be ahead, but I'm not sold that he'll be so far ahead of Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards in this game. Just wanted to make that point.
And he could, I mean, we could see more pass catching volume for the running backs this week for Baltimore if they just have no choice. You know, they're pretty low in terms of running back target share as a team. And of the three, Dobbins has clearly been the one involved in the passing game. So that's a good notch in his favor. And I don't know, do you have any read on this Pittsburgh running back situation between Snell and McFarland? Because there's been conflicting signs over who they prefer there all year long.
Yeah, lately it's certainly been Snell, but we haven't seen them without James Conner. So yeah, I mean, I think there's more volatility than the salary and the ownership projection would suggest, for sure.
Yeah, bringing up the volume, you can see that Snell has gotten, about twice the amount of carries of McFarland the last few weeks, but combined it's only 23 carries. But McFarland has a few targets in the passing game, while Snell has absolutely none, and that's kind of what intrigues me. Where, that could be just straight up noise. But if McFarland's going to be the passing down back, even if Snell has the better split and the rushing share, McFarland's going to be pretty close to him in terms of projection because the targets are just worth so much.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, last thing I want to ask about is kickers in this game. People always want to know, can I play kickers? Should I play kickers? I thought last night, at least for cash, the Seattle kicker, Jason Myers, was in play. What do you think about kickers in this particular context of a slate where it's expected to be more low scoring?
You got to give yourself some credit here on these cash plays. Jason Myers crushes, and I don't think we covered that. I brought it up in someone's message, but you rolled Tyreek Hill in cash from the get-go. So
yeah,
we didn't even mention that. So
yeah, I talked about it on the solo pod. I mean, if you guys want to hear a long rant on Tyreek versus Ty Fluke, I did it on the solo pod. It just posted about an hour ago. But the bottom line is, when Tyreek was Ty Fluke, he was seeing like 6 to 8 targets a game, and people were paying like 8,500. In the last month, Tyreek's target shares have been 31, 33, 40, and the Chiefs are throwing at the highest rate over expectation in the entire NFL. So I just thought it was a different spot for Tyreek. That's not to say I thought it was a slam dunk. I thought Keenan Allen and Steph Diggs were right there as well, but just got lucky to want some exposure to Kansas City. I didn't have Mahomes. I didn't have Kelsey. I was like, it's close. Let me just play Tyreek. And the next thing you know, I have a 60 ball on my hands. So yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. Great call. As far as the kickers on this slate, I think Tucker, his projection in systems is probably going to be lower than it usually is because the expectation for the Baltimore offense is so low, and that flows through to the kickers. But if you want to get leverage against Pittsburgh defense, one of the biggest negative correlations out there is kicker against opposing defense. You get a few field goals from Tucker. That's going to bring down the Pittsburgh defense scoring, while also putting Tucker in at half the price. He's going to be at like a minimum of 9 points if you get 3 field goals if they stall in the red zone. So I think the kickers are fine in this slate. What's tough about the kickers is if you look at like the distribution, they just don't have the ceiling of some of the other players. And with salary not being an issue, you start to wonder in the bigger field tournaments if you'd rather just take some shots on DuVernay, McFarland, who are less likely to outscore the kickers. But when they do outscore the kickers, they're doing it by a larger amount because, just the distribution of the skill players is more right tail than it is for the kickers.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We will be back tomorrow to update these projections, to update the ownership projections. Silva is working on an update to his Steelers-Ravens matchup. Cody is working on the showdown breakdown for this game tomorrow. So we have a lot of stuff for subscribers ahead of the game tomorrow. I love afternoon football because obviously I am home all the time and I am looking to watch some football and more accurately play some fantasy football. Smash the like button. I mean, it says it right there. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. More importantly, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. We appreciate it very much. For Leone for producer Leone. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.